With loads of business advice flooding the industry, it has never been harder to see the path to success. And you can't take action if you don't have clarity. Get clear on the actionable tips and strategies that will help to scale your business here on Masters in Clarity, the podcast that brings you clarity around messaging, business growth, digital marketing, personal development, and the business owner's journey to success. Let's join our guide, the master of turning clarity into action and lasting impact, Dolores Hirschman.
So thank you so much. And it's so good to see you after what it feels like forever, but it was only about 2 years ago.
I'm so happy to be here, Dolores. Thanks for having me.
I remember when you interviewed me for your podcast that you were still working full time. And as you just said, like sneaking some podcast interviews in lunchtime or after hours. And that was just 2 years ago. It feels like yesterday, but it was like 2 years ago. And you just said you have over 70 people in your team. And you went from, well, maybe I go on my own to here, which you're obviously not on your own because you have a lot of support. So talk to me about that. How did that come about?
You know, it was really about paying attention to everything around me. I could have been an entrepreneur way earlier. First of all, I was scared. I was scared to be an entrepreneur. By the time I quit my full-time job, I had 30 people who were already working for me, and we were making like over $50,000 a month. And I still wasn't quitting my job because I was just scared. And even though I had all the signs telling me, go, 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 I was just scared and wanted that steady paycheck. What really gave me clarity was understanding that my brand was here to stay and that I had done the hard work to have that sort of security blanket. And honestly, my network was my insurance policy because I had built all these great connections and relationships. I had done a lot of free work for people and a lot of people had my back. And then I finally felt like, you know what, I can go out on my own. And I think if anything happens, I could always go get another job, and I just didn't feel scared anymore.
I love that. You said making $50,000 a month and still scared of letting go of the job. I mean, that's a safety net, right? And for many, but I think what I'm hearing between the lines is that, is it real? Is it steady? Is it safe? And it's crazy how many times we feel that a full-time job with a paycheck is safer than your capacity to create value. I remember having a conversation with my brother at the time, and he was leaving his job. And he was saying the truth is about a job is that at most you have 30 days of safety. Like, depends on the contract, but in many cases, you can be out and one more
2
paycheck.
weeks.
3 weeks, whatever, that time, the severance time, right? But $50,000 a month don't go away so fast because in the entrepreneurial world, we're totally diversified. So let's talk about a little bit of your entrepreneurial journey and what have you done to really transition or transform that mindset of a job is safe. And now I know you feel safe in your work. How did that tweak happen?
I think it was, first of all, surrounding myself with people who believed in me more. At the time when I was trying to quit my job at Disney, and there was a few months where I was ready, but the people who loved me were telling me, you're making the biggest mistake of your life. You got your MBA and you're an executive at Disney. So many people would kill for that job. Like, you're selfish. I got a lot of you're selfish and you're not cut out to be an entrepreneur and you're too nice to be an entrepreneur and you don't know what you're walking into and you're going to regret this. And so I had a lot of people, my boyfriend, who's no longer my boyfriend, even my parents, they loved me and they were meaning well, but they just really always thought that I was just going to be this executive. But sometimes you need to think about what you want. And for me, I was like, hey, I could stay at Disney for the next 20 years and eventually become the CMO. Maybe that could happen, but maybe it won't because I'm giving my life to the gatekeepers, and giving my life to other people to make their decisions for me. And I felt like, hey, I can do this very quickly on my own. And I had a lot of experiences before corporate also that I could lean on, and a lot of skills and a lot of leadership capabilities and experiences. And I just decided, you know what, I'm going to like, if nobody wants to hang out with me for a little while or whatever it is, like I got to do it. I got to do what I have to do to be happy. And so I did it. And now everyone, including my ex-boyfriend, is like very proud of me. You know what I mean? But nobody can see what you can see inside of yourself. So I needed to actually change my environment, was a big part of it.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, because you can't get nurtured differently in the same environment. So what did you launch? Like, and we're talking here about what you launched, but what do you do?
Yeah. So I have a #1 podcast called Young and Profiting. And then I also have an agency called Yap Media, and we are a social media and podcast agency. So we specialize in LinkedIn management, Instagram, YouTube, and then end-to-end podcast production. So we essentially create LinkedIn influencers in particular. So I manage a lot of LinkedIn influencer accounts. I'm one of the biggest influencers on LinkedIn myself. And then I also create and grow podcasts. And I think what differentiates me from a lot of the other agencies is we not only produce your social and podcast content, we grow it. And so we're really all about performance. And now we're monetizing podcasts, and I launched a podcast network.
I love them. We will talk more about that in a little bit. And so if I do the math correctly, you launched in the pandemic.
Yeah,
right before.
I launched in the pandemic, and I actually launched, my father passed away last May 2020 because of COVID. And I launched my business while he was in the hospital.
Wow, that gives me chills.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Well, how did I launch my business and how did this all come about? So we were working from home.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, my dad, unfortunately, I don't know if you're asking about my dad or the business.
I mean, either, however you want to take the question, because I think there's just a timing that there was a decision made while that was tragic.
And you know what? It was super pivotal. So I'll go through it because I think it's a great story. So it was around March of 2020. The whole world was starting to catch wind of COVID. Many of you guys, if you're not in the New Jersey area, you might have heard that like New Jersey was one of the first states that was really hit. And so I would say my family was one of the first families that were hit. And I remember getting a call from my sister, and I was living in Brooklyn with my boyfriend at the time. And she's like, "Hey, mom and dad have COVID. Your aunt and uncle down the street have COVID. My sister's a doctor." And so she's like, "I'm coming home to help. Are you coming?" And I was like, I guess I am. And of course I am. I want to help my parents. And so within like 20 minutes, I packed up, my sister picked me up, and then I didn't go back to Brooklyn for 3 months. So wow. I literally just packed up my stuff. And then, I think that was also the end of my relationship. All that kind of stuff like kind of happened because of what happened. So I ended up going to my parents' house. My parents were very sick, and I got COVID because I was taking care of them. And then I ended up quarantining. At the time when people got COVID, everyone was really scared of you. And so it's like, I didn't see my friends for 3 months. I had a lot of time, basically, is the moral of the story. So my dad goes to the hospital. I'm working from home from Disney. I no longer have a commute. Everybody at Disney's working from home. I have no friends to hang out with because I got COVID. Nobody wants to hang out with me. And so I was like, I've got all this time. Everybody keeps asking me to launch this business. I'd get all these people coming on my podcast, and they would ask me the same question. Who does your marketing? How did you grow your LinkedIn? How did you grow your podcast? Can you do it for me? I'd always say no until finally I had time to say yes. And so I said, sure. Heather Monahan was my first client. She's a big influencer on LinkedIn and an author. And she's like, please do my videos. So I started with her videos. It was a very small contract. Then I moved on to Kathy Heller and other podcasters doing their videos and micro content. And then eventually I started taking over everyone's social and everyone's podcast and really just taking it all over and slowly just building a team. I recruited my creative team from the Philippines, my ops team from India. All my social media people were interns at first, and then hired them from the US. And I just like created this little scrappy team. And 6 months later, I had like major clients like Kara Golden of Hint Water, who's doing all her marketing, all the marketing of Hint Water, and like a buzzing team and full-time employees in the US, which was a big deal to me at the time because I had a lot of employees overseas, but that's much different than having a full-time employee in the US. So, and then I finally, decided that it was time for me to leave Disney. And I was too big of a fish for that pond.
Well, and so many things here in that it really is about that moment where whatever with COVID and your parents and time and just that chain of events that say, okay, now it's time. And so now you're basically the wind behind the wings of these major influencers that you're working with. What is your secret?
My secret is I'm so passionate. I designed a job that I love. I designed a job that I'm really, really good at. And I'm not scared of building a team. And I'm not scared of letting go when I have to let go and training people and letting them become leaders. And I think that it's my leadership and management style that really allows me to kind of grow and take on more and more and be able to innovate. Because now I can kind of have my team members run the agency. And now I'm working on building this innovative podcast network. So I think it's all about designing a job that you love.
I love that. And one of the things that I think it's that you mentioned, because people think, okay, I'll just launch a company and I'll just get people to help me and I'll get some contractors, and then you run payroll in the US for the first time. And that's a big moment. I remember that when I run payroll, it's like, oh, whoa, I have to do that again next month. But there's something there that you said is that, without the people skills or the management skills, it's almost impossible to do what you did. So now that you have this nicely run agency and you're building the podcast network, tell me about where are you going? What's 12 months, 2 years, 5 years from now?
Well, really, I think that's going to be the podcast network. So what happened is that when I started this, the lead generation and the monetization of my podcast was really the agency. And I used the podcast as a lead generation tool. The guests that would come on my show, they would want my marketing and end up becoming my client. So literally almost everybody that I do marketing for was a guest on my show first. And I never sold them. It was just a good impression. They saw everything and they would be curious and it would lead to them becoming my client. Or now I get referred by like my clients referring other people that I may not know. Right. So that was the first way that I monetized. Then I figured out how to actually monetize my podcast because I was able to get money to reinvest in my podcast and grow it very large. And then I learned how to grow my other shows very large. And I started to monetize those shows. We did such a great job at monetizing those shows. We're sold out until April. And so that triggered me very recently, just 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, to launch my own podcast network. And so I'm actively recruiting shows. And I feel like I've been building this network without ever even realizing I was building the bones of this network all along throughout the 4 years of this podcasting journey that I've been on. And so if you had asked me when I first started the podcast, what I wanted to be in 5 years, I would have said, I'm going to have the biggest podcast network in the world. That's what I used to say 5 years ago or 4 years ago. I never said I wanted to be the CEO of a marketing agency. That was just the steps that I needed to get and actually was the bones of this network, because now we're going to be able to do cross social media sponsorships, cross-channel sponsorships, and we're better equipped than any other network out there to do that because we have a whole agency and nobody else has that. All the other networks just have audio production, but we have a whole marketing agency. So it's just amazing. And I feel like I'm just so excited about that. So my full focus right now is just like network, and recruiting podcasters and building this network to be the biggest network in the world.
Well, I have so many connections for you that we're going to have to spend like 30 minutes after we're done here. Let me ask you a question. Where do you feed yourself? I know you changed the environment in which you were operating, and that shift kind of supported this big shift that you've done. But where do you get ongoing support, new ideas? Where do you get challenged?
I love that question. So first of all, I purposely have a mentor that is much more successful than me, and that's Jordan Harbinger. And I talk to him every single day. And I think that he gives me challenges because he'll talk to me about things, and I'm usually the one who knows everything about podcasting. He's got like 10 years on me in this space. So he'll teach me new things. And that's a great way for me to learn. I feel like I'm on the cutting edge of this industry. So I'm always the teacher. And it's really nice to sometimes just be the learner in some instances so that I learn. Also, I like to be the glue of communities. So one of the things that I did early on was recruit all of these influencer podcasters into a WhatsApp chat and start a mastermind group. So I have like a podcaster pod, I call it, and we support each other on social, and we have calls, and many of them have become my good friends who I've, met up for dinner, or like if we're in the same city, we meet up, or the same podcast festival. So that's been really rewarding and a way for me to kind of bounce ideas and things like that. And then of course, my business partners, I honestly treat my employees and my executives on my team like my friends, and they're my best friends. And so it's really nice to be building a company with people who are my age, and like we're just rocking it together and all super passionate and rewarded. So
I love that. I love that. How big do I need to be to call you? To call your agency? Who do I need to be? What kind of podcaster, what kind of entrepreneur do I need to be to pick up the phone? Because you sound so amazing in everything you're doing. And I know you work with a lot of influencers, but what about the small business owner? Are we a right fit?
So I would say it just really depends on like your budget. We do have a monthly retainer. Typically we work with CEOs who are like the CEOs of $100 million companies or $1 billion companies. And a lot of times their company is what's funding the presence of their CEO, because the valuation of their company increases when their CEO has a great personal brand. And so we're really white glove. There's many social media agencies out there. We ghostwrite, we publish, we do like DM automation, and we pull out all the stops. So it's on the more expensive side of a social media agency. But like I said, a lot of agencies, they don't perform. And so they're just creating content to create content, and they're getting 2 likes on their stuff. We go viral and get crazy results, right? So I think that's like a big differentiator for us. And in terms of the podcast, to join the network, all you need is 5,000 downloads per episode on average, and I can help you monetize your show. So that's something people don't realize. A lot of podcasters out there think they need to be having hundreds of thousands of downloads to monetize, and that's just not true. And so you can join the network if you're getting those downloads and grow your show, because I'll be helping everybody kind of grow their shows by leveraging each other's audiences and kind of trading commercials and doing innovative things. And we can help you start to monetize that show.
Love it. Love it. Well, one of the last questions here, what book, podcast, or Netflix series should we be watching?
My favorite book, I don't watch TV, by the way, not very much. My favorite book is The Like Switch by Dr. Jack Schaefer. And he was also my first guest on Young and Profiting podcast and came on a few times. So if you guys want to learn about that and you prefer to listen, you can check out my podcast. And if you want to read the book, it's called The Like Switch. And it's all about human behavior and how to gain influence and how to land great first impressions and things like that.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you. So where can people find you?
Thank you, Dolores. This is a lovely conversation. You can find me on youngandprofiting.com. All my links are there. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Hala Taha, on Instagram at Yap with Hala. And of course, my podcast, Young and Profiting, we interview the brightest minds in the world. I've interviewed Matthew McConaughey. I've interviewed Dolores. I've interviewed Seth Godin, Robert Greene, and it's a really great podcast, super nerdy. We talk about how to gain influence, productivity, the art of entrepreneurship, and so much more.
Love that. Any parting thoughts? What do you want to leave us with?
Just that, if you've got passion, you should follow it.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you so much for taking time to be with us today.
Thank you so much, Dolores.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Masters in Clarity. If you loved today's show, please subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review. Share this episode with 2 people in your world, and as a gift, go to mastersinclarity.com/free to download free clarity resources. Join your host, Dolores Hirschman, next time to continue forging a clear path to your impactful success.